In the movie it says, the quote is made by Hawking, and I'm going to give my best memory of this. He says, because there's a law like gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. Spontaneous creation is the reason there is something rather than nothing. And then I think there was an addendum, you don't need God to account for the universe. This was a little bit of a retraction because maybe Hawking in the past had a little bit of an open door about that.
He did. He left the question open at the end of The Mind of God, but he's come out clearly as an atheist. It's that quotation that you've just made that was the motivation for me writing the book. I was shown that just before Hawking's book appeared and asked by a national newspaper to comment on it. And I was so amazed at this. Because there is a law of gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. And I thought, hang on a minute, that's a flat contradiction. Because there is a law of gravity, that is because there is something, the universe creates itself from nothing. I mean, that's just flat contradiction. And then I thought, but wait a minute, because there is a law of gravity. He doesn't even say because there is gravity. And it seemed to me there that he's become a victim of thinking that has become a little bit popular in academic circles, that laws can create things, which is nonsense, of course. Unfortunately, the financial crisis came about by that. People thought that the laws of mathematics could create money, but they can't create anything at all. More seriously, perhaps still, in that sentence, the universe will create itself. Now, if I say X creates Y, what do those words mean? Well, if I've got X, it'll produce Y. So if I say, if X creates X, what does that mean? It means if I've got X, it'll produce X. And in the book I just put, and it came out in the film, I say, well, that just proves that nonsense remains nonsense, even if spoken by very clever
that
scientists.
got one of the biggest laughs of the whole day.
Yes, and what people don't realize is that here is Hawking. He's a brilliant, famous scientist. He was just ahead of me at Cambridge. I remember it very well. I've no quibble with his science, but it's what he deduces from it is the problem. And it reminds me of something that's very important in this area, Rice, and it's this. Statements of scientists aren't always statements of science, but the trouble is because they've got authority, people think this is an authoritative statement of science and that Hawking has solved the mystery of the existence of the universe. He hasn't. He's given a statement that has 3 distinct levels of contradiction built within it. That's not a very good start.
Really, the essence of what Hawking is saying is that nothing can produce everything, but they don't really mean nothing by that.
No, they don't mean nothing by that. And that's immensely important. Actually, I find it highly amusing what's going on, because here we have the most ironic situation in history. For centuries, scientists believed that the universe had existed forever, because that's what Aristotle had taught. The Bible, however, had been insisting for millennia, in the beginning, God created the universe. There was a beginning. Science caught up with that in the 1960s. And I remember that because when the evidence for a beginning to space-time came in, the leading members of the British scientific establishment said, we don't go down that road. Why? It'll give too much leverage to people who believe the Bible. Now we're in the situation where the general opinion of cosmologists is space-time had a beginning. Okay, so what was there before? Nothing, absolutely nothing. In the philosophical sense, absence of anything. But you can't get a universe from nothing. So the way they now do it is to redefine nothing. I mean, Lawrence Krauss, who's an astrophysicist, says something.
Oh my goodness! You get on to him. I'm interested in anything you have to say about him. It's hilarious.
Absolutely hilarious, I'm afraid. Forgive me, but he says because something is physical, nothing must be physical, especially if you define it as the absence of something. Well, that's sheer nonsense. Now, I had the opportunity to debate with Alan Guth, who's the father of inflation theory at the Harvard
Borde, Guth, and Vilenkin,
Borde, Guth, and Vilenkin, brilliant mathematicians. And I had a very friendly public debate at the Harvard MIT Faculty Club. And I asked Alan publicly, I said, you know, there's much ado about nothing going on about there. People outside, people are really confused about nothing. Now, Alan, I said, when you talk about nothing as a cosmologist, you don't mean what most of us mean by nothing, absence of anything. No, he said, we don't. They talk about a quantum vacuum and they talk about, but that isn't nothing. And so the public is being confused. And I say it's ironic, because here are these very intelligent people writing endless books and getting something from nothing, but to do it they have to redefine nothing. They have not solved the question. Whereas, from the Christian point of view, the question is solved. Because there wasn't nothing, there was God, who's non-physical. God is spirit, and he caused it all to be, and he supports it in being. That makes perfect sense. The other doesn't.
Wow, this is, again, the book God and Stephen Hawking. Dr. Lennox, just thinking about this, let me try to just summarize in essence. When you're asked for evidence for God, when you're asked for the evidence for God, the beginning of the universe, you either have one or two things. The atheist says, well, it could be gravity. Hawking says it's gravity.
Yes, wherever that comes from.
So it's an eternal law just hanging there, or
yes.
There's an eternal lawgiver. So really, we're within the intellectual bounds to say it's far more reasonable to present a lawgiver than a law.
I would always prefer a theory that actually explains something than one that doesn't, and something that stands to reason than one that doesn't. And when it comes to the beginning, the biblical view makes perfectly intelligible sense. It's certainly, at the very least, has the right to sit at the table. I think it's more. I think it's actually true. And I think that the atheist view actually is incoherent at this point.
I can't stress enough how important this video is. You ought to watch it again and again. We'll have other videos we'll be recommending, of course, the book God and Stephen Hawking, to hear the actual. You heard Josh, as an 18-year-old freshman, try to explain in a class the response to this, but you want to hear and read what Dr. Lennox says, how to specifically answer that question of why there's something rather than nothing. Obviously, we believe there's a creator. And so we hope to equip you. We hope these segments will help equip you so that you can give those answers. When that moment comes for somebody who says, what's the reason for your faith? You'll be prepared, as the scripture says, to give that reason and give that response.
And I think perhaps it's important to say, if I may add to that you don't need to have an advanced degree in physics to read this book. I'm writing the book about not the science, but the way people use it. And it's accessible to young people of all kinds, even to people that haven't studied science, because I'm trying to give them some kind of way of responding into this debate, even though they may not be qualified by having a degree from some university in that topic.
Well, I have this book in my library. You need it in yours.